Thursday sessions. We think that anyone who's interested in learning about different business models, about how the business has been going, the difficulties, the problems that they're solving, this is what we're all about on Thursdays. So today I'm going to be kind of moderating a discussion with Rory Buckworth of Biologics, and they are based right now in Kenya. You'll be hearing a little bit more from them later. But before we get started, I was wondering if anyone here, let me see, if anyone here can raise their hand if they want to say something about biochar already. So for instance, I'm looking for people who might already be using biochar, or might actually have a biochar business, who want to say a little something about biochar, perhaps about how it's been beneficial for your communities, or how you got started in biochar as well. So if there's anybody here of the 42 folks who've joined us so far who has experience or any facts about biochar that they want to share for a second, we're looking forward to raise your hand. And while people might be raising their hands, I'll remind some of the logistics that are true every time. We do have interpretation. So if you speak English or if you speak French, get that turned on now. I know that's what I'm doing. I'm clicking English because at any point, our colleagues who speak French might also join on, and you want to be sure to understand what they are saying. So select English or French. The other thing that we're looking forward to is questions in the question and answer box. So we will be able to more easily refer back to the question and answer box. So anytime you have a question, put it there. If you just have comments, if you want to comment on anything, if you want to be like, yeah, I think that's true, put that in the chat box, and that's going to be perfectly fine. We have a few of these reminders here. We'll keep your microphone on mute. Turn on the interpretation by either looking at the globe or the 3 dots that says more. Question and answers. Thank you so much, Fabiana, for bringing that up, in the question and answer box, and the reactions in order to raise your hand. So that's really awesome. And so far didn't really see anybody with their hands. I saw somebody clapping. So yeah, practicing practicing the reactions of clapping. That's good. Kind of waiting to see. So Rory is trying to sign in with his cell phone.
Yeah, I think I'm here now.
Okay.
I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Hang on, just 1 second on my
yeah,
side.
no problem. Yeah, he's signing on in 2 devices. So we're getting ready there on that.
Yeah, so I think oh, sorry, bear with me. Hey everyone, so sorry that I'm having some technical issues, but while I sort this out, so yeah, my name's Rory. I'm one of the co-founders of Biological. We are a biochar carbon removal company, and yeah, really excited to kind of be here today and to run you through a little bit about, what biochar is and how we work and what we do. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. I wasn't expecting so many people, honestly. It's a good turnout. So yeah, exciting stuff.
And sometimes people even join a few minutes afterwards. So we'll see how many we get today.
Brilliant.
But what I was getting is, it seems like everybody here must be new to biochar, perhaps.
Sure.
Yeah, so this could be really interesting to know, because I was looking for folks to raise their hand if they've used biochar or if they actually are in the biochar business. And I'm still looking for anyone to raise their hands if that's the case.
I'm sorry, I'm actually looking for a place to raise up my hand, but I couldn't find the...
Okay, Mudin. Well, now that you're here, and we'll get Anne next. Now that you're here and you're speaking, we can ask you a little bit about it, Mudin. Mudin, what's your experience with biochar so far? And what would you want to share with the group about that?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to share this with you, my little experience about biochar. The way it's happened, the way it started is that I'm a farmer, and I have about 8 years of experience in agribusiness. And oftentimes here in Nigeria, fertilizer is becoming more expensive, more unaffordable for the farmers. So in the year 2020, during the coronavirus, where a lot of farmers find it extremely difficult to go outside, to go and find to go and buy their fertilizer. So I went online and I was actually looking for alternative to imported or synthetic fertilizer. And in my research, I discovered that biochar is also one of the alternatives we can use. So fortunately enough, in our environment where I reside here in Nigeria, we have a lot of rice processing company, and we never knew that biochar could be made from those rice husks, because of course a lot of all these small scale rice processing centers, they burn their rice waste, they burn the rice husk, and this contributes a lot of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. I mean, carbon releases a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. And I decided to put into practice. I developed a prototype. I used it in my farm. Later on, thereafter, I added lots
Mujin,
of other.
I have a quick question for you. Is your main business now biochar, or do you have a multi-pronged business that includes biochar?
I can't hear you. Can you repeat it?
One more time. Is your main business biochar, or do you have multiple things that your business sells?
Yes, right now that's exactly what I was saying was all about the genesis behind my voucher business.
Mhm.
Today, I'm happy that I'm producing voucher, and I'm also producing voucher fortified fertilizer, organic fertilizer made with voucher materials. My company produces voucher and also voucher fortified fertilizer.
That's perfect, Eugene. I think that we should give you a round of applause and also listen up for our speaker, because who knows, there might be some ideas for collaboration or something that you haven't heard before. But I think at this time, I'd like to take a minute and introduce one more time, or bring back to the microphone Rory, and because he prepared a presentation for us today, and we can get to hear the presentation, and a lot of people, we can have questions and answers like we do, and anyone who's interested in biochar can find each other during the chat room, and we'll make sure that you guys can connect with each other afterwards, that you want to discuss more about your businesses and how to improve that. So I'd
Sounds
like
great.
to, yeah, here's Roy. I'd love to ask you to present, and that'd be awesome.
No problem. Yeah, so again, thank you so much everyone for coming to listen. Hopefully you can share a little bit about, biological, what we do and how we use biochar to improve the climate resilience of smallholder farmers and to sequester carbon as well. So as mentioned, I have a little presentation. So hang on, let me just share my screen. Sorry, my camera on my laptop's broken, so I'm kind of operating off my phone and my so bear with me 1 second. Great. Can everyone see that?
Looks perfect. Looks perfect.
Cool. So I guess what I'm going to do today is just kind of run through our business, kind of the problems we're looking to solve, what we do and how we solve them, a little bit about our traction to date, just and a little bit about, I suppose us as a business, really. So I guess, we're called Biological. We're based in Kenya. For those of you that know Kenya, just about an hour north of Nairobi in a place called Thika. Our company mission is to use carbon removals to build the climate resilience of what we describe as climate vulnerable communities, right? When we talk about climate vulnerable communities, really what we're talking about, although I think there are many different examples of this, are smallholder farmers. So essentially, maybe one more point. So essentially, just to summarize how we work, we are a biochar carbon removal company. That means we process agricultural wastes into something called biochar, which I'll run you through in a little bit. That does two things. It sequesters carbon, so we earn carbon credits, which we sell to companies like Microsoft. We also then use it as a soil amender, similar to the comments we just heard about a biofertilizer. So I guess maybe just to frame this and sort of these things probably won't come as a massive surprise to all of you, given the nature of this group. But the problem that we're looking to solve, right? So ultimately, the most, people who have had nothing to do with the climate crisis are some of the worst affected people on Earth when it comes to climate change, threatening livelihoods, of course, but also as well, threatening, even as far as global food security. Billions of people a year rely on smallholder farms for food, and as climate change impacts their livelihoods, there's a knock-on effect that's felt all around the world. I probably don't need to list off these challenges to everyone here, but I think particularly that are of interest to biochar is this, drought and irregular water rainfall, which leads to inconsistency with harvests, and also increasing need for and price of chemical fertilizers as well. And essentially, due to climate change, what you have is this incredibly challenging environment that smallholders are facing, despite the fact that, the carbon footprint of a smallholder farmer in Kenya or, many other countries in Africa is not the root cause of this problem, right? And so at Biological, we fundamentally think that is unjust. And so our core mission is to build the climate resilience of these communities. So on the one hand, you have the smallholder farmer and the challenge they're facing, right? You have declining agricultural yields, you have drought, you have expensive fertilizer, you have all of the results of climate change. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have the root cause of climate change, right? Which is essentially, I think, as we all know, concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, which leads to global temperature rises and increasingly erratic and unpredictable weather patterns. I think I don't know how many people here are based in Kenya, but obviously those of us that have experienced firsthand this year just what erratic and unpredictable weather patterns can look like with the rains. So it's not always just about global warming, which I think is the expression that often gets used. It's much more about, changes in weather patterns and how that affects smallholder farmers. And so the other side of our business is this focus on reducing the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, right? And so just to frame what that looks like, before we go on to explain how we do that, the IPCC, so the leading body on climate change globally, have essentially said that by 2050, we need to be drawing down about 10 billion tons of CO2 every single year. Today, carbon removal technologies and indeed natural solutions like trees remove around 2 million tons. So, there's this huge, huge, huge gap between where we need to go and where we are today. I love this infographic. I guess for most of us probably know the Burj Khalifa is the world's tallest building, right? And so carbon removals in 2021, we're currently about the size of a Coke can that you can see down here, or a Coke bottle. We need to get to the Burj Khalifa by 2050. So, there's this huge, huge need to rapidly scale up carbon removal technology, which is what we do. I guess our unique spin on it is that we address the root cause of the problem as well as the people that are suffering under its impacts.
I had a question about that, Rory, if I could
Sure.
ask, which is carbon removals in 2021. Is that including like carbon credits that were sold from new forest projects and then all this carbon capture technology that we're talking about,
Yeah.
like basically everything that's already existing?
Yeah, so I actually misread this. So
Mm.
2 million tons of CO2 every year is from what we would call engineered carbon removal. And
Mhm.
so that's solutions, for example, as you mentioned, like direct air capture, enhanced rock weathering, biochar. It could even be, yeah, a few other blue carbon
Oh, but
things.
biochar counts in that. That's really exciting.
Well, it kind of depends on who you speak to, truthfully. I
Mhm.
think depending on who I'm speaking to, I'd probably lean one way or the other. It kind of sits a bit awkwardly in the middle between nature-based and kind of engineered removals. Um,
Understood.
it's a
Mhm.
bit of both, truthfully. Nature-assisted engineered removal is what I sometimes refer to it as. But yeah, so in total, tons removed every year is actually 2 billion tons. But that includes, all the trees that are standing, all reforestation, everything. So
Mhm.
yeah, so carbon removal, engineered carbon removal has a role to play in kind of scaling this up, but we really need to go from 2 billion to 10 billion, is the kind of real number if you take a step back from engineered carbon, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. We need to go from 2 billion, which is every tree that we already have, to
Exactly.
10 billion, which
Yeah.
will require basically everything that we
It's
have.
a pretty mammoth task, and so the IPCC now have basically made it very clear that there's no pathway to 2 degrees without getting towards these numbers of carbon removal. So,
That
this
makes
is not
sense.
no longer kind of a nice to have. And I think sometimes people think are, you know, just reducing emissions is going to solve the problem. You know, much cleverer people than me have made it very clear that this is now an essential thing for us to, you know, mitigate the worst impact of climate change.
Thanks for sharing the magnitude of the problem, which of course I think all of us know and or at least aware of, but then just to hear more and more details about that is important
Yeah,
for us to get in our minds.
no worries at all. So the solution. So I guess I'll focus now just kind of on biochar, and then I'll explain in the next slide how we actually operate as a business and how we use biochar. So it sounded like from the initial sort of question around who's working with biochar, it sounds like not many of us are super familiar with it. And so I can sort of give an overview of what biochar essentially is. And I think it's important when we think about biochar to first maybe just quickly summarize the sort of carbon cycle and how that contributes to climate change. So there's a long-term carbon cycle. So that would be an example of, say, the creation of fossil fuels, much longer carbon cycle, things degrading underground, being locked up there for thousands of years, right? But then you also have this, and by burning those fossil fuels, we have, you know, increased the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. You also have a short-term carbon cycle. So I think a lot of us will know that as a tree grows, it, in simple terms, absorbs and holds carbon, right? And when that tree dies or that plant dies, that carbon goes back into the carbon cycle, contributing to the overall concentration of carbon in the atmosphere. And so essentially what biochar is everything else that is in organic matter removed apart from the carbon itself. So essentially it's like charcoal, and it's made by a process called pyrolysis, which is essentially the burning of organic matter in the absence of oxygen. So I think the easiest way for me to describe this is, I think driving around Kenya or, you know, other parts of Africa or the rest of the world, we've probably all seen a charcoal mound before, right? Where people put wood in and then they cover it in mud and then it smolders for a few days. I think the easiest way to think about what we do is it's quite a high-tech version of doing that. And by high tech, I mean that we are capturing all of the methane and other gases that are emitted and putting them back into the system. So it's an emission-free system. But essentially, so what we're doing, so for our instance, we work with macadamia shells and rice husks. We take that waste, we put it through this process and turn it into a stable form of carbon that locks up CO2 for, you know, some studies show up to 1,000 years. So maybe I'll pause there. I don't know if anyone has any questions. That's on the sort of carbon removal side. And then the other side of the business is really about the impact on soil health. But does everyone understand the kind of concept on locking up carbon and carbon removal? Happy to field any questions there.
I do see we have one question, which might be, getting toward, you might cover it when you go towards the second part, talking about how it has impact on farmers, which is the nutrient concentration per 100 grams of biochar. Maybe that's something later when you talk about the product a little bit more, but I think it's a great question. And Roy, would you like to answer it now or cover it a little later?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I would say about biochar, right, is that the nutrient value itself is pretty low. I'm just trying to get some test results up. It's not something that we really focus on, right? And I'll come on to kind of how we use the biochar in a bit and how we kind of change that. But the main benefits of biochar, right, are these things you see on the right. So in simplest terms, biochar has an incredibly high surface area and is incredibly porous and absorbent. So essentially what you find is that when you combine it with, say, organic inputs like we do currently, or even chemical fertilizers, it holds those nutrients very well. So when it's put in the soil, it reduces runoff, and nutrients around the soil. So it's more about what you load the biochar with than the actual nutrient value of the biochar itself. There's actually a lot of studies that show that if you put raw biochar onto fields in the first year, what you actually sometimes find is that the yields actually reduce. The reason being that that biochar is so absorbent that it actually holds a lot of the nutrients that would otherwise be in the soil. The other factor as well, and I think this is really its key point, particularly in, you know, areas without reliable rainfall, is that because it is very porous, it has this amazing ability to hold water in the soil. And so what you'll see in studies is that during a drought, land that has biochar in, the soil, the crops are much healthier because that water is kept around the root. So it's a very long way of answering that. I'd be happy to dig it out, but it's not something we really talk about because the nutrient value in itself is basically zero, right? Like it's much more about how it improves soil structure and how it acts as a carrier for other nutrients.
Well, I thought that was an amazing answer to that question, because it's just an answer, a response that might not have been expected, but it can tell us a little bit more about how biochar is actually working and the kind of amazing properties that it has. So it's not just I'm trusting blindly that biochar will work, but no, there is a science behind it. And I think it was very interesting what you even brought up that the first year it might be lower because it's so absorbent, but it's going to deal with a lot of the other problems that we see definitely, which is of course the runoff. Any fertilizer that you buy is just gone. It's
Yeah.
it's gone. In the drought resistance is going to be amazing. So
And
I
I
think
think that's a really interesting point around the prevention of runoff, right? Because what we find a lot, so we only started selling this product recently. We've probably sold, I think, 200 tons this planting season. So, we are just starting on this journey. The way it interacts with chemical fertilizer is also very interesting because there is a time and a place, I think anyway, for chemical fertilizers. I'm sure we could have a long discussion with this group about the pros and cons of that. Um, but what it does, it drastically reduces the need to buy, the requirements that you need to sort of give the crops the nutrition they need, because all those chemicals are held in all those NPK numbers are held in the biochar. So it's actually got really interesting use cases throughout organic agriculture, but also on the other side in organic as well. Would you rather that I answer questions as we go, or would you rather kind of do them at the end? How would
I
you
don't
rather?
know. I kind of like to, it's up to you. I like to break it up a little bit, but we don't have to answer all the questions as we go. And we could keep going because we do have them sitting right there and we have it so
Yeah,
everybody else can see the questions as well. So we've got a lot of awesome questions sitting there and we'll answer them.
yeah.
Uh,
This is a pretty good page to talk a little bit about like our model and the different stages of the model. So I guess maybe just to quickly answer the question, why rice, macadamia, and not other agricultural materials? So, we as a business, and I'll come on to our scaling ambitions in a bit. I mean, we as a business plan to have multiple sites processing multiple different types of feedstock. Those range from, coffee to the waste from palm oil production to even invasive species, right? So we're not limited to rice and macadamia. To be honest, that is just what we've built our first site around. So that first site will process around 30,000 tons of waste every year and will be Africa's largest biochar facility. So there's no real reason aside from availability that we started with rice and macadamia. Macadamia does make extremely good biochar due to a high carbon content. But yeah, we will be expanding into all sorts of different feedstocks, so we're not really limited. That I would say.
Great
Cool.
question, Jason. Mhm.
Yeah, great question. So, oh, sorry. So what I'll do here, I don't know if you can see the questions in the middle of my screen, can you? Or can you just see my slides?
I see your slides only. What questions are
Okay,
you
no,
talking about?
no, that's fine. I'm just wondering what you guys are seeing because I've got them up just so I can keep referring to them. Okay,
Oh,
so
no, yeah. We,
yeah,
everybody can have the questions open if they want to or not. It's
perfect.
up to them.
Yeah, sounds
So
good.
I also have them up. Mhm.
Wonderful. So what I'm going to run us through here is kind of how our overall business model works. Jason, to your question around pyrolysis, I will, when I get to the carbonation part of our kind of product journey, I'll try and expand on that where I can. So our business model ultimately starts with the smallholder farmer, right? So within the rice and macadamia value chain, crops are grown by, I think our partners work with around 200,000 smallholder farmers. That food is then that crop is then aggregated by a number of sort of usually companies looking to export in the case of macadamia, or companies selling internally when it comes to rice. And essentially, those companies produce a huge amount of waste from their production process. And so rather than dealing with the smallholder farmer, our personal belief is that it's much easier to do biochar production at scale If you work with the kind of agri-processor versus on the smallholder level, really that's just down to the complexity of logistics to be working with the individual smallholders. There are definitely models of biochar production that work on a much more local smallholder farmer basis, but we very much opt for an industrial style process that partners with large agribusiness that do a lot of the aggregation for us. So that's really the first step. So yeah, our agribusiness partners collect and produce waste from smallholder farmers. We then take that to our central facility. So the journey kind of begins with us going to our partners, taking the waste, and then dropping that off at our production facility, which is in Thika. So when it arrives at the production facility, the feedstock for the biochar goes through a process called pyrolysis. So pyrolysis, as I said, is the burning of organic matter in the absence of oxygen. There are really two ways of doing this, to your question, Jason. There's really, in industrial terms, because there's three ways of doing this. One is kind of a low tech method where you essentially make charcoal. The issue with that is that it's not in my opinion, it's not particularly scalable, and there's a lot of emissions associated. The second is a continuous system. And so that generally will be like a conveyor belt fed system that has a rotating drum inside. The organic matter goes in, it goes through the process and comes out the other side as biochar. So quite high tech, quite hands off, very industrial. The method that we use a batch system. And so what that means is that we have 4 kilns that are kind of connected in sequence. We then load up basically baskets and lower that into the kilns. We then heat them from underneath. So it's a manual process. We load these large kilns with about a ton of feedstock at a time. That produces about a third of a ton of biochar. And our site, when it's fully up and running, will produce around 10,000 tons of biochar every single year. So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have any pictures. I'm on a borrowed laptop, so but yeah, like if you have some questions, we can maybe exchange details and I can share like some more detailed pictures about the pyrolysis equipment. But what I would say is it's a batch system, so it's loaded manually. And the key is that all the gases that are emitted from the process are recirculated, right? And so methane, nitrous oxide, all of these extremely polluting gases are used to fire the kilns. So we light one, and then the gases are used to light the others. And we actually run for like 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, like that. So it's lit once at the beginning of the week, and then it's a continuous process moving forwards from there. If you have specific questions on the equipment, happy to answer them. It's kind of a topic in itself, but more than happy to share some information with people who are interested to see some kind of after the presentation as well. Cool. And then so with our biochar, well, as a business even, we kind of have 3 main products. The first is our acyl fertilizer. So as was mentioned in the discussion prior to this, one of the things you can do with biochar is create a really powerful organic fertilizer. So what we do after the biochar is produced is that we combine that with single source organic inputs. So that's chicken manure, avocado waste, and a few other microbes and things. We then granulate that and bag it, and then we sell that to smallholder farmers, but at a heavily subsidized rate. So if you remember back to the first slide where I was talking about using carbon finance to support climate vulnerable people, this is essentially how we do it. So we take carbon credits, we sell them, we generate revenues, which we then use to reduce the cost of the bag to the smallholder. So we sell our bag for 1,500 shillings for 50 kilos, which I think anyone in Kenya will hopefully realize is about 1,000 shillings less than the government subsidized fertilizer, and 1,000 to 1,500 cheaper than really any competitor that's kind of anywhere near what we're doing in the market. So that's product one. So our site will look to produce around 600,000 bags of our product, which is called acyl, every year. The second product is our carbon removal credits. So as I mentioned before, the process of creating biochar removes carbon from the atmosphere and locks it up for up to 1,000 years. And so we work with an organization called Puro, who are a issuing body of carbon credits. We follow essentially their methodology. For those of you who don't know much about carbon, they essentially make a set of rules that we follow. Those credits are then issued. We then sell those to companies looking to essentially offset emissions and accelerate their race to net zero. So we have a contract with Microsoft and another couple of companies in Europe as well. And then product 3 is we can also sell raw biochar. This is actually not something that we do too much of. It's really on this slide to kind of demonstrate that there are multiple revenue streams for the business. It's something that we're doing at the moment whilst we scale up our fertilizer sales. In the long run, really, our main products will be our fertilizer, so building the climate resilience of farmers by sharing, helping them benefit from all those properties that I mentioned that biochar has, as well as carbon credits as well. And then the idea being that obviously through a silly fertilizer, we increase yields, which in turn increases the yields of smallholder farmers, and then the process starts all over again. So a circular economy, waste coming from the field, being turned into a high value product that sequesters carbon, and then returned back to the smallholder, saving them money and increasing yields.
I had a question, Roy, about your 3 products at the end here: fertilizer, carbon removal credits, and biochar sales. What do you think? Do you guys have any models so far to say what percentage of revenue do you think each of those 3 products will be having in your business?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I mean, initially, carbon credits are a bit more predictable for us. We have offtake agreements for the next couple of years for carbon, and so I can safely say that assuming we deliver the carbon credits we say we will generate the revenues that we have there. Fertilizer is a little bit more of an unknown. Truthfully, the sales have been much better than we have been modeling initially. The idea would be by the end of 2025, they're about 50-50.
Wow, very exciting.
Yeah, so that's the aim. We want to build a business that can stand on its own 2 feet with fertilizer and also with carbon credits. Not to go into this too much, but I think one of the major mistakes a lot of carbon businesses make or are forced to make just due to the technology is that they rely solely on carbon. And, I think the markets are, have proven to be pretty volatile over the years. So I would say anyone here who's thinking of a carbon business, I would recommend to think about how you can have an additional revenue stream. It's easier in some models than others, but yeah. Cool. And maybe a couple of questions out. How can you determine the type of soil nutrients by percentage composition present? Lauren, I'm not sure I actually understand that question. If you, feel free to kind of clarify. Jason, that's an interesting question around chemical fertilizer, organic fertilizer, and soil amenders. Where do you classify biochar as to differentiate from the 3 variants? So I personally think this is more of a commercial question rather than an actual category question for me anyway. We believe the most effective way to get farmers to use our product is to align it with things that they're comfortable using already. So that's the reason we granulate it. That's the reason we sell it as a biofertilizer, because we feel that farmers are comfortable with that mode of application and that product type. Biochar is probably on its own a soil amender, but when combined, and there's a company, Safi Organics, I encourage you to look up if you're interested, in Kenya, who sell raw biochar and are doing reasonably well. But for us, it's about putting it into a form that they kind of understand. So for us, it's actually about aligning more with organic fertilizer as opposed to differentiating ourselves from it.
I think that was a great question, and we actually invited Safi Organics to join us, but he was traveling to be in Singapore. So who knows? We might be able to get him on later. But
yeah, you should. They do a similar thing to us. They at the moment don't have the carbon credit angle, although I think that's changing at the moment. So yeah, we're definitely operating in the same space for sure.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that there's room for a lot of people to operate in this space because there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of agricultural waste that could instead be turned to biochar.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the opportunity to produce biochar in in Kenya is huge. There's so much agricultural waste and other waste sources, in fact. So yeah, there's definitely yeah, definitely a big opportunity there. And so Jafar, just to your question around the cost effectiveness of using biochar compared to chemical fertilizers for any crop, I think that the way we look at that, we have two types of customers. I think is the easiest way to put this. We have organic farmers. And so with an organic farmer, what you're really looking at is you're looking at substituting what they're using currently for our product. And really there's two buckets of that customer, right? There's they use manure, and therefore this is probably more expensive than manure, but the boost in yields in a lot of studies is 100% plus. So, in that instance, the cost is more, but there is, the value is greater as well. You get more for your money. The other type of farmer are those that are buying organic products already. That tends to be a pretty obvious price comparison. As I mentioned, most products in the market, because they don't have the carbon subsidy, tend to sit at around 2,500 to 3,000 for organic fertilizer, at least ones that sort of work. Things that are made by Regen Organics, for example, in Kenya, or I don't know how much that means to everyone on the call, but so that's a pretty straight up just price comparison. The application rates are roughly the same, and we would probably save them 1,000 shillings a bag. So we recommend about 8 bags per acre. So you think, it's about, call it 4 to 8,000 in saving per acre, depending on how much the farmer listens to that advice. The second type of customer we have are customers using chemical fertilizers, right? And I think that we as a business, our approach to farmers using chemicals is not to try and convince them to drop everything they're doing and suddenly start using organic only. I think that for me anyway, if I had someone come to my farm and tell me to forget what I've been doing for 20 years and to start doing something totally different, I would be skeptical, and probably rightly so. And so what we do there is we suggest that they supplement their chemical fertilizer with our product. And so essentially what we've found is that by reducing DAP use by half and combining with a half application of our product, the farmer can experience the same, if not improved results. And we have some trials that if you want interested in seeing them, I can share some pictures with you and stuff afterwards. Again, apologies for the lack of pictures today. In that instance, you're saving the farmer a significant amount of money, whilst having exactly the same yields, but also as well, of course, not just for this season. The beauty of biochar is it stays in the soil, for the sake of the lifespan of a farmer, kind of for a lifetime, right? And beyond. So this compounds year on year versus the opposite, which is the case for chemical fertilizers, where soils get further and further degraded, more acidic every single year. One thing I didn't mention actually on the point of soil acidity is that one of biochar's amazing properties is it's very alkaline. And so in parts of the world with acidic soils, like most of Kenya and actually a lot of Africa, it has an additional benefit in balancing out soil pH as well, which is one of the reasons why it's so effective when combined with the chemical fertilizer here in Kenya. I have to admit my French is not particularly good. Um, so questions that are coming in French, I don't know if someone could translate or something.
I translated a few of those, and there are some pretty basic questions. So I'll go through all three of them. One
Right.
is, what are the equipment that one needs to start producing biochar? That was from Vincent.
Yeah. So it really depends on whether you want to do an industrial scale biochar production or whether you wanted to do it, say, at home on your own farm. At home on your own farm, what you probably want is to Google Kontiki kilns. So I don't know how I'm supposed to type, but yeah, Kontiki kilns, which are basically a really low tech option, which are fine if you want to make it for your own farm. If you wanted to do industrial biochar production, you would really need to look at sort of pyrolysis equipment. So as I mentioned, that ranges from like continuous systems, which really will cost you from, 200,000 to some European companies are even like $1.2 million plus. Or a batch system like ours, a set of 4 kilns that produces 4 tons of biochar a day, sits at somewhere in the region of $75,000. So ours is kind of a middle ground between the two. Happy to answer any specific technology questions. I feel like it's a bit of a rabbit hole that we could spend some time on, but certainly I would Google Kentucky kilns to kind of get started and trying it out if you have access to feedstock.
Yeah, so one more time, if I could just have that, I wanted to maybe put that in my notes. And I'm sorry, I was looking up Kentucky films and Kentucky kilns. I actually put that in the chat box so people could check it out.
Yeah.
Kentucky kilns is something that looks like they could learn how to build themselves, or maybe
Yes.
find local providers. And then there was two other options. One was $75,000, and what was
Well,
that?
I mean, I wouldn't,
Around,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, like, so the batch system we use, which is manually loaded, is a bit cheaper, but much more labor intensive. And then you have very high tech sort of continuous systems, which they range a lot in price, truthfully, but are certainly more expensive.
And how did you guys choose the one that you guys chose? You went for the manually loaded batch system instead of very high tech. How was that decision made for your business?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, pardon me. I think that that decision really stems from a few things. I mean, the first thing is that this is a very nascent industry, and the off-the-shelf expensive continuous systems, in our opinion, are not particularly reliable and often made in parts of the world that are quite hard to kind of get spare parts from. And, so it was really a reliability thing that pushed us away from continuous. Secondly, the beauty of the batch system is it's much more cost effective, it's cheaper to get up and running, but also it can be fixed locally. And I think, when you're located in rural Kenya, I think it's important to be able to fix things locally rather than relying on, say, a Chinese company to send you spare parts as and when you need them. That can obviously, I think a lot of us will have dealt with the complexities around doing that. We also think as well, a unique advantage that we have is because if you can imagine, we have sort of 4 big buckets, basically big kilns buckets. I'll share some pictures afterwards so that you can circulate them. And so we can essentially work with 4 different feedstocks at one point, right? So we could have one big kiln working on sugarcane, one working on coffee, one on macadamia, one on rice. In our instance, it's mainly rice and macadamia at the moment. But the continuous systems don't really allow that. They're conveyor belt fed. It has to be a consistent feedstock. So there's also an advantage about, not to the question earlier around taking advantage of the varied feedstock sort of waste streams that there are in the country as well. But really it boils down to like reliability, affordability, and also scalability as well, and which is kind of down to affordability as well.
I think that's a really awesome discussion. Just as far, I think it opens up a lot of minds on what you can Google more on if you're interested in getting involved with biochar. So thanks so much.
Sure. And I would say just to that point, anyone is welcome to like connect with me on LinkedIn after this. And if you have any more specific questions that I didn't answer properly today, I'll try my best to take the time to kind of get back to you. So very, very happy to do that.
Awesome.
Cool.
I'm not sure, maybe you want to continue with the presentation and we'll
Yeah.
keep the questions there and we'll answer a
Let's do
few
it.
more as we go on. All right.
Let's do it. So this is really just kind of like a high level overview of kind of where we're at as a business. So we raised money last year. We're actually about to raise a little bit more now. So fingers crossed, there's an announcement coming reasonably soon around that. The money we raised was to build our facility in Thika, which, to be honest, it's not yet Africa's largest biochar facility. After we raise this money and we get additional machinery in, we will then be Africa's largest biochar facility. But it's definitely over the next year is set to become so. So fertilizer production is underway. So we have sold now, I think it's just under 200 tons of fertilizer. So that's in our first season, which personally I'm very, very happy with. We've had really, really good uptake. I think the way I see it is that farmers really care about 2 main things, right? It's yields and it's price. And so what we've done, and this is what these 400 farmer trials is designed to do, is that we actually gave out a lot of free samples, working with farmers to help them understand the benefits of the product, but also using those farms as a focal point for sales. And so we have 400 farmer advocates who actually act as commission-only salespeople for us out in the field. But also, I think it's been really important to kind of show farmers that this works, right? Farmers, in my opinion, don't really buy into people telling them something works. You really have to show them. And so this has been, if anyone's out there trying to thinking of how to start a business that sells into smallholder farmers, my advice would be show, don't tell. It's a really, really important thing that has really helped us to sort of scale up the fertilizer side of the business. It's early days. 4,000 bags is not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, but certainly is a good trajectory given we've been selling for about, call it 2 months now, 3 months. So yeah, definitely I would encourage people to show, don't tell. Carbon credit offtake. So as I mentioned, we have actually Africa's largest biochar carbon removal deal, biochar carbon removal deal with Microsoft. Microsoft are the largest buyer of carbon removal certificates in the world. Really exciting partner. Very, very excited and happy to be able to, say that we're working with them. Key to our business is our feedstock supply. So we have contracts in place for around 30,000 tons of feedstock for the next 5 years. I'll be honest with everyone here. Sometimes it's difficult to get those contracts kind of over the line. So that number is probably slightly misleading, but it's probably closer to about 20,000 tons. I don't know if anyone's had the pleasure of trying to work with sort of large agribusinesses in Kenya, but sometimes they can be a little slow moving. So, but for now, solid feedstock supply. We're also part of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which, if people haven't checked that out, I would encourage you to do so. It's a really good initiative and lots of really, really good sharing of ideas. And yeah, I mean, like, this is basically where we are today. These are kind of the highlights of our traction as a business. Don't know if anyone has any questions on that. Cool. So just quickly, like, who are we? So obviously my name's Rory. I've been working in the carbon credit space in East Africa now for the last few years. I was actually living in Uganda before this. I moved to Kenya to set up Biological, and I run the business with Phil. But yeah, we've been really lucky to attract some people, some really exciting companies, like, truthfully, that I would encourage people to check out, I guess, for your own interest. Net Zero, who are a Cameroonian-based biochar company. Our head of production joined us from there. Cocoa Networks as well, who are, I'm sure many of us are aware, the leading, one of the leading cook stove project developers in Africa. Octavia Carbon, the Global South's first direct air capture facility, and M-Pesa as well. So, I think that agriculture really draws in a lot of people, I find, at least in Kenya. I think there's a real affiliation with farming, with agriculture, and we've been really lucky to have so many great people join the team. This is a bit outdated now. We're about 40 people now. But that's one thing I would say to everyone here: if you're hiring and you're looking to attract talent, play into the agriculture piece, because I think it really resonates with a lot of people. Cool. So some high level numbers on impact. This is the impact that our site will have at capacity versus what we've done to date. Just to make that clear, we're yet to sequester 20,000 tons of CO2, but when the facility is at its full scale, we'll be sequestering 20,000 tons of CO2 every year. To do that, we have to process around 60,000 tons of waste. So 30,000 tons of waste goes into biochar production. The other 30,000 is largely chicken litter. So our site smells excellent, I can assure you, and avocado waste there as well. So, also, although it's not central to our business, we are also sort of cleaning up waste streams that are quite problematic. Avocado waste, for example, is a huge problem in Kenya. There's a huge buildup of it from the oil industry. So we think that roughly every year we should be able to support around 100,000 smallholder farmers. It does depend on how many bags each farmer buys. So, I think take that number with a pinch of salt, but roughly 100,000. And yeah, I think another main thing that we're looking to set up is kind of combating gender inequality through community-based vocational training. So we haven't set this up yet, but and I'd be interested in collaborating here with anyone that is working with this space. Our idea is that, once we're generating, once we're selling carbon credits, so our first carbon credit sale, we've sold them, but the first transaction takes place in August. Once we've started doing that, we're keen to set up a small fund that will work with local organizations to improve gender equality within agriculture. Because what we found is that something like 75% of farmers in Kenya are women, but barely any of them own land, have any opportunity to kind of grow and discover new opportunities, particularly in the world of work. And so that's something that we both feel very passionate about, and something that we're looking to explore. So anyone who works in that space, feel free to drop me a line. I'd love to talk to you and see how we could collaborate on that. Cool. So where are we going as a business? What's our kind of ambition for biological? So 2024, where we are now, we're building Africa's largest biochar facility. We'll look to sequester 20,000 tons of CO2 every year, supporting 100,000 farmers. By 2026, we have line of sight on projects that will get us to 300,000 tons of CO2, and support 500,000 smallholder farmers. So we're working on 3 new sites in Kenya, one in Garissa, one in Shompole in the south, and another in Mombasa. Those will be processing, to the question earlier, those will be processing different feedstocks. So that one will be bio-oil production waste, so castor seed waste. The other 2 would be invasive species. So just to give you an idea, this can be done with pretty much any, organic material. The variation comes with the cost and how many carbon credits you get from it. But the end result, the biochar, is pretty similar with a lot of different products. By 2028, yeah, I mean, we hope to support 1 million smallholder farmers every year and be sequestering 600,000 tons of CO2. So that will be projects we're already exploring, as you can see there, Uganda, South Africa, Tanzania. So all of this is geared up towards the aim of sequestering 1 million tons of CO2 every year by 2030. So our philosophy as a business is that we want to scale quickly, and we want to be the largest carbon removal company in Africa, and then hopefully the world. So I won't go into too much detail about all of those projects. They're all at varying degrees of kind of they're under development, let's say. But these are our ambitions, and we think the opportunity far surpasses what we're looking to achieve by 2030 for us. So for anyone else looking to get into the space, there's plenty of room for everyone.
I had a question right here for you, Rory, which was,
Sure.
if you can just go back really fast. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
In 2020, you mentioned join AFR 100 and bring online Article 6 funded projects in Africa. Could you tell us what Article 6 funded projects are?
Yeah, sure. So Article 6.2 is a tricky one. This is a hard thing to explain.
Oh.
At least I find it a little tricky anyway. So Article 6 is essentially a mechanism designed at Paris, or the Paris Agreement, or in the Paris Agreement, which is essentially a mechanism to allow countries to trade carbon. So, and this is really to avoid this concept of double counting.
Yeah, okay.
So, to give you an example of double counting might be, so let's say the Kenyan government has its own commitments to like reaching net zero, decarbonizing. So they count certain activities in those efforts.
Yeah.
So, but what they want to do is create a mechanism that allows, say, the UK to purchase credits from African projects, from Kenyan projects. And so the whole mechanism is around how you account for those carbon credits, moving from one jurisdiction to another, and who accounting. So essentially, Article 6, in simplest terms, a project under Article 6 would be state sponsored. So an example on a project I worked at in my old role, so a couple of years ago now, was with the Ghanaian government and the Swiss government. And so essentially the Swiss government funded a clean cooking project in Ghana. They would take the carbon credits for their own NDCs, their own commitments around emissions reductions, whereas the Ghanaian government or the Ghanaian communities benefit from clean cooking. So it's really just a mechanism to shift carbon kind of around the world. To be honest, it's still, the reason it's in 2028 is that a lot of it isn't really nailed down right now. Um,
And you'll be ready for it when it is.
that's the plan. Yeah. It's an ever-changing kind of landscape, I guess you could describe. And so, for example, the Kenyan government right now do not have like the framework in place to kind of do this, but they are quite close. So it's quite hard to explain because a lot of countries haven't really got their heads around exactly how it's going to work. But
Yeah,
yeah, essentially it's a mechanism to do projects from country to country versus say company to company is the
yeah, I
easiest.
think that makes sense. Let's just know it's about double counting, so we don't all think we're saving the planet faster than we actually are, so
Exactly.
that it's really actually happening. That makes sense. Perfect.
And the AFR 100 is the tree replanting
Oh
uh,
yeah,
with
definitely. So you can
WRI,
join
right?
that. Yeah, you can join that anytime you want.
Yeah,
Let
we've
us
spoken.
know if you're
Yeah,
not in
sure.
contact with people. Mhm.
Yeah, we've spoken. We're speaking to I've spoken to Susan like quite a lot. And so yeah, it's been a conversation that's been ongoing for a while. We're actually doing some trials with WRI and iCraft at the moment, some scientific trials. Um, we hope anyway to kind of pave the way to some sort of future collaboration. So yeah, we'd love to do that.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what you need from a partnership and making that known. Since WRI is larger,
Yeah,
there can be so many different avenues for how perhaps partnership could help you guys achieve your goals. So very exciting.
yeah,
Mhm.
awesome, awesome. I'll drop you a message after this and we can discuss.
Perfect. Yeah. Probably next slide. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like I just thought, given a lot of people here will be thinking about, oh, sorry, thinking about setting up their own businesses, like what the market opportunity here is, right? Um, in short, the carbon markets for me represent the most exciting market opportunity in the world today. I would I would say that like it's something that I've been working in for a while, and but I think any reports you read, any indications that you see just show that the industry is growing so rapidly. And I mean, you can see here, right, like 43% annual growth rate, and you really see that is not something that you see every day. So, I would say that when you are thinking about building businesses in agriculture, do think about how you can incorporate carbon into that model. It adds a secondary revenue stream. It really will help you attract funding. It's very, very in vogue for investors right now. And yeah, it's set to grow, at least in my opinion. I'm sure some people will have a differing view, set to grow rapidly over the next decade or so. So a really exciting opportunity there. Fertilizer, a little bit more steady. But the African fertilizer market, in my opinion, is set to boom. If you look at any stats around the amount of fertilizer used in Africa versus the rest of the world, it's something like a quarter of the application rate of the rest of the world. So, African countries are not using as much fertilizer as other countries around the world. The reasons for that are pretty clear. I think as economic development like continues and many of these countries are continuing on the amazing trajectory that they're on, you will see a rapid increase in fertilizer use, which we aim to be at the forefront of, particularly organic fertilizer.
Can you remind us of what CAGR means, CAGR? I really did forget. I could Google it, but let's get everybody on the same page. What does that mean?
Compound annual growth rate. So
Oh, because that's how fast the market is growing.
it's the growth rate of the market year on year.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Thank
for
you.
the voluntary carbon market is growing 43% a year.
Mhm.
Set to be 50 billion by 2050 is the general consensus. So yeah, lots of exciting opportunity. Um, Biochar. So as we mentioned, like our main product line is not raw biochar. However, like even in the last 2 years, truthfully, that I've been doing this, I have seen a complete shift in the understanding of what biochar is. And actually, if I built the business today, I might base it on, at least in part on raw biochar sales. That, especially in Europe, especially in America, there's a real understanding of the benefits and even, in other parts of the world as well. So that's also a really exciting opportunity. I think as we scale, you saw on the previous slide, right? We're looking to produce 600,000 tons of fertilizer every year. I'm very realistic about the fact that, it may be that we have to diversify our product line at that stage. And so raw biochar may well be a really exciting opportunity to do that. and also experiencing a lot of exciting growth. The market really in its nascency. I guess I'm showing this just because I feel there are huge opportunities in these three spaces. And yeah, I guess if people are looking at setting up businesses, it might be something to consider.
Super exciting. I mean, just to see these kind of growth numbers as well is really exciting. And the more and more people can learn about how to use biochar in their specific communities, it's going to be a product that really takes off. You know, I see, for instance, the question from Josue Aruna, can biochar be applied everywhere? And he says, I'm worried about deforestation if this is applied in a tropical forest. I'm not sure. I mean, definitely converting tropical forests into agriculture is not what we're about at WRI, and that's the opposite of what
Nor
we're
us,
trying to
I
do.
hasten to
Yeah,
add. Yeah, so to answer that question, so I mentioned earlier, there are essentially a set of rules you have to follow to issue carbon credits, carbon credit methodologies. So yeah, like a group of experts will sit down, they'll write this, it'll be backed in science. One of the key things in the biochar one is that it has to be a waste product. So you can't even grow crops to make biochar, and you certainly can't chop down trees to make biochar. So there are protections against that. And yeah, I certainly wouldn't encourage anyone to start chopping down trees to make biochar. Definitely just focus on waste products. Maybe I'll rattle through a couple more of these questions. So, George, how many bags of biochar fertilizer? In Nakuru, George, we just launched in Nakuru. So our product is available in a shop near you somewhere. We recommend 8 bags per acre, although you truthfully, that's a kind of a commercial decision. I mean, you can use less and you can use more. It's the more biochar that you have in the soil to a degree, kind of the better, truthfully. But we recommend 8 bags per acre.
do you think that maybe people could start with the base level and then have more, as you said, that biochar is actually something that can stay in your land and continue to work on it for many years? So if they were even maybe afraid of having some of those I don't know, side effects you talked about the first year, what if they
Yeah.
did less and then they did more next year? Or what if they weren't
Yeah.
ready to
So with
invest
our
in everything?
with
Mhm.
our product, so the negative side effect around the first season, we mitigate that by charging it already. So by mixing it
That's
with
right. Mhm.
manure and avocado waste, the nutrients from that compost are absorbed by the biochar.
Oh,
So
okay,
like
perfect.
I
Mhm.
think the easiest way to, and I say this every time, like biochar is like a sponge. So like if you imagine a dry sponge, if you dunk it in water, it's going to absorb everything there, right? It's exactly the same with nutrients. So, but once it's absorbed, it's not going to bring in any more, and it will hold it and it will gradually release it out into the soil. So yeah, it's all about you in the biochar world, you would describe it as charging the biochar. It's like putting nutrients in there to stop that happening. So yeah, I would recommend 8 bags per acre. We have worked with people who've used more and have seen improved results. Or if you're using chemical fertilizer, I would suggest trying it out with 4 bags of our product and half your, DAP or NPK application.
Very, very useful conversation there about
Hmm.
that. Mhm.
Jason, very interesting question around water hyacinth. We're actually looking at this right now. So the one thing I would say about biochar production is that drier waste is better. The drying process, so you have to get the moisture content roughly below 15%. And drying, at least at an industrial scale, is actually like really quite challenging. Unless you have $1 million to spend on a decent industrial dryer, which is quite hard to fundraise for. So I would say yes, we're looking at water hyacinth. However, the moisture content, at least until it's dried out, is reasonably high. But yeah, like it definitely could work. And there's a huge opportunity, right? For invasive species, clearing them, turning them into biochar. So yeah, it's a good idea and something that we've explored actually. So but yeah, it's a good idea and it could well work. Collecting it's a little bit tricky as well that we found anyway from our research, but it all depends on the scale you want to do this at as well, right? If you want to do this at home, then definitely, yeah, go grab some water hyacinth, dry it out in the sun, make some biochar with a Kentucky kiln. It's very doable. So yeah, good idea, really good idea. Elaborate on the biochar kiln. I think the easiest thing for you to do, Jason, truthfully, is just to look up Kontiki kiln. I popped it in the answers for you. Just have a look at that and see. It's a kiln that you can make at home. Very, very basic, and it will help you kind of get started. Jafar, yes, I would be more than happy to share my email address. I will probably share that via
Link,
um yeah, exactly, yeah. But so yeah, but anyone's welcome to email me. I will try my best to get back to everyone. Depends on how many questions I get, but as I say, we're fundraising at the moment, so I'm a little busy, but I will do my best. Okay, have I answered everyone's questions? Have I missed any?
let me see. We had a question about maybe quality assurance from Jason as well. A lot of people are bagging silica as an organic fertilizer and soil amendment. How do you make sure that you ensure quality assurance?
Ooh, well, there's two sides to this, right? How do I know we're doing quality assurance? Because I know we're not doing anything like that, right? Like I'm on site all the time. Our team are very committed to making a good product. So it's a very easy thing for me to know. I suppose the interesting thing here is it's a harder thing to prove to people and customers, right? It's actually, yeah, it's interesting in the fertilizer space. You do come up against, particularly because our product is quite cheap, or I should say better value. I don't like the word cheap, better value. We do come across this sometimes. Truthfully, if anyone has any questions about our product, I'm more than happy to show them like test results, more than happy to, you know, give them a sample. I mean, it is tricky, and I do think truthfully, like some of our customers can be quite stubborn. And even when shown pretty conclusive evidence, still sometimes don't believe you. So yeah, it's actually, Jason, honestly, if you have any suggestions on how to prove to our customers that we are doing what we know we're doing, I'd be happy to hear them, because it is a little tricky at times. But certainly for me, we do quality assurance regularly on all our bags. We produce everything in-house. There's really no opportunity for any unscrupulous people to kind of get involved with our product, as far as I'm concerned.
And I would say maybe that's a combination of many techniques, from branding, to giving out free samples, to doing tests and talking about those tests or making those available, to having testimonies. So these are all kinds of things that any business can do in order to prove,
Yeah.
in order to build trust with their public as well. I saw a cool question, actually, if we're going to do a few more questions in the chat, which I would suggest people put it not in the chat so it doesn't get away. But it was, how does biochar compare to composting? Do they go together at all? Is there an advantage of one over the other? And that is from, I'm trying to see the name. It's the name has kind of gone away. Asit Shah had that question.
I see. Yeah, good question. So I mean, in short, we do both. So if you arrive at our factory, on the left-hand side, you have windrows of compost. On the right-hand side, you have our factory producing biochar. So we produce compost, and then we combine it with biochar. The easiest way, for me, the easiest way to describe this is that the compost brings the NPK values that we all know are essential for plants. Biochar brings the improvements to soil structure, the water retention, the lack of runoff. So biochar is like almost like a structural mechanism to it. Sorry, is a mechanism to improve the structure of soil, whereas the compost is used to load it with nutrients and give the plant what it needs. You can
So
load,
it like goes
you can
well
load,
together.
yeah, it does. It does go well together. You could also use chemical fertilizers to charge biochar, but we personally use organic products. So yeah, on their own, they're actually very different products, but you can combine them very well. And I would actually, if you do make any biochar, I would encourage you to charge it with something. It can just be manure. Some smaller producers even just make kind of like a watery mix of manure, like, and then you can just like sit the biochar in there for a bit. So yeah, there's lots of options to do it. You'll find most of them online, honestly. But yeah, they go very well together. Yeah, I hope so anyway, because they're pretty central to our business. So I'll let you know in a few seasons' time. But yeah, I think it goes pretty well together. I wouldn't say it's like an advantage of one versus the other. I mean, I would say biochar has the ability to improve soil structure, which in turn helps to promote healthy plants. But I also think compost as well is an essential tool when it comes to giving plants the nutrients they need without chemicals. So they kind of work together versus it's an either or, in my opinion, anyway. So what are the difference between biochar and small crystals of charcoal that seem to be reduced to residual powder? The main difference between charcoal and biochar, for the sake of this conversation, is that when you produce biochar, you do so at a much higher temperature. So the percentage of carbon is much, much higher than you would find in charcoal. That's the first thing. But secondly, the process also involves something called quenching. So essentially, when you finish making the biochar, you put it in water, and essentially what that does is it opens up the veins of the surface area. So essentially, the process increases the surface area, and then the treatment at the end increases it. So it's a much higher surface area, and essentially, so let me backtrack. In charcoal, normal charcoal, there's a lot of tar from the pyrolysis process, from the charcoal production process. In biochar production, the way in which our technology works, it essentially removes the tar as well. So all of those, we call them veins, but all of that surface area and the network of kind of tunnels in the biochar are tar free. So it's got a much higher surface area. Those are kind of the two main differences. It is a little confusing because they look exactly the same. Truthfully, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart with the naked eye. I don't know if that answers your question. However, you can use charcoal powder as addition to compost, and it will work reasonably well. It still has some of the similar properties. So if you have some lying around, I suggest give it a go. And then how is our process or model tech enabled? Oof. I mean, so we mainly the tech comes on the side of our carbon credit issuance. Sorry, just saw another question come in and I got distracted. Mainly the tech comes from our monitoring process. So when you're issuing carbon credits, you have a process called monitoring, reporting, and verification, MRV, which is essentially tracking the entire process and recording that so that you can have carbon credits issued. So we are essentially designing our own MRV system. So that's a tech-enabled system that hopefully uses IoT to monitor the different points of the process, and then we can issue credits kind of in real time. The rest of the process, truthfully, if we're talking about tech as in like software, it is not really super software based. So yeah, mainly on the carbon credit side is where we have tech, but I would be remiss. I wouldn't call us a tech company, right? I think we're probably a manufacturing company. If that answers your question. Biochar to compost, it's about a third biochar. 1/3 biochar, 2/3 organic inputs. You know, that's our personal opinion. Some studies will do 20% or up to 50%, but generally it's between 30 and 50, let's say. Okay. My understanding biochar is clean such fertilizer. How much do you sell? Do you know? So we sell a 50-kilo bag for 1,500 Kenyan shillings. If I can elaborate more on the use of this fertilizer. Yeah, I mean, I don't quite know what you would like me to elaborate on further. I mean, so yeah, we sell it at 1,500 shillings. We recommend an application rate of 8 bags per acre. It can be used on pretty much any crop. It's particularly good at on crops that like alkaline soils. So certain crops prefer acidic soils, so it's not as effective for that, but it's pretty crop agnostic. And we've seen really great results with everything from maize to beans to tomatoes and kale. So one day I think we'll look to diversify our product line and bring out some more crop specific products. But for now, yeah, it's a pretty one size fits all approach. And you know, I think important to circle back to like why we do what we do here, right? Like the biochar, when in the soil, improves the land's ability to remain resilient in the face of climate change. So in the face of drought, in the face of like floods, in like loads of different scenarios, biochar can actually benefit the farmer. And so our original business model was about how can we put this biochar, which is so beneficial for farmers, into a product that they recognize, which is how we kind of came to this fertilizer idea. So yeah, I don't know what you would like me to elaborate on, honestly. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a flavor for kind of how it works.
And I see a question in the chat, if you didn't catch it, is how can people around your area get your product?
Good question. So at the moment, we are doing direct to customer sales, direct to consumer sales, to see how that goes. We're doing it through this network of what we call village-based agents. We will be looking to be stocked in stores very soon. Truthfully, at the moment, it's working for us, and we want to get the product absolutely right before we start going through larger retailers. So that's a long way of saying you drop me a message and I'll put you in touch with someone, basically.
And talking about messages, I created just right now, and I put it in the chat box. I put in there a WhatsApp group. So anyone who's here who's interested to continue the discussion around biochar, you can join that link. I'm just going to leave it there. I disabled the chat just so that it could stay there in case people wanted to join that. It's going to be mostly unmoderated, but if anybody, oh yeah, Rory, you can still write. There's your email. Thanks. If anybody wants, you can write to Rory at the email address he provided, and you can also click on the chat, click on the link for the WhatsApp group. It's about biochar, and people can continue sharing resources and thoughts on biochar. So if you're in the business, or if you really, really wanted to find out more and get involved, join that WhatsApp group right there.
Great. Yeah, awesome. I have noticed there's a few questions that have come in on the chat as well. One that was quite interesting around high quality carbon credits and the pricing there. So, I mean, carbon credits really can go from anything from $1 up to direct air capture, which, 700, 800, even $1,000. Our credits we sell for about $130 a ton. So that's at like the upper end of the scale. There's a big gap between what we do in direct air capture, but yeah, about $130 per ton. Cool. And that's it from me. I hope that was interesting. I hope you got a flavor for biochar. There's a lot of stuff we could dive into and spend hours talking about, but yeah, I've put my email in the chat. If anyone has any specific questions, or particularly is working with any organizations that, as I mentioned, are empowering women in agriculture, feel free to drop me an email and I'll try and get back to you. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And yeah, happy to answer any final questions.
Yeah, I think this is really amazing. We're gonna a little bit later, right before we head off, which we have officially until the 30 minutes after.
Yeah.
So officially 10 minutes are left, but we'll definitely give everybody a chance to give you their thanks verbally and everything. We'll have everybody unmute themselves later. But I just had another question, which is, as you look at this is what I'm doing next, this is what I'm doing next for your team, what are the next steps that you guys have for your growth and for your success? Open-ended questions.
No, it's a really good question, and there's a million and one things, truthfully. So I guess I look at our business, there's like a few buckets, right? So there's biochar production. So we're fundraising at the moment. I mean, that's taking up quite a lot of my time. Hopefully that's going to be done in a couple of weeks. The first thing we'll do is we will get additional machinery into our site. So we've actually put the deposit down for 3 more sets of machines.
Wow.
Pyrolysis machines, as soon as we get the funding. So that will be the first thing we do. That will
So you have 1 machine right now, now you're gonna get 3 more. Is that how it is?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. So you've been working with that 1 machine, you've got a lot of processes figured out, a lot of inputs figured out, and you're ready to I guess quadruple what you're doing.
Yeah, and then we'll bring on another 2, between 2 and 4, depending on the numbers that we get by the end of the year. So yeah, the main reason for that, maybe just if anyone's interested, I mean, the main reason for that was that we wanted to see how the machinery operated before we spent loads of money. You know, I think it's really, really, in my opinion, it's very good, important to test, to understand process, to build out your understanding of whether something is fit for scale before just jumping into something. And what preceded that was lots of trials at home in my garden, you know, so it's like a step-by-step process. So that's definitely one thing around increasing capacity. Another thing is, so yeah, as I mentioned, we're currently not stocked in stockists. The reason being, truthfully, we haven't had to be yet, and I'm keen to maybe have slightly more control over where the product ends up initially, just because we're still it's very young, you know, new product, so we're still testing a bit.
So you actually want to get into stores? Is that what your next one was?
Yeah, so definitely we'd look to be starting to get into stocked in the stores. Yeah. So that's on the commercial. We have a new product in the works, which is quite exciting. So one of the byproducts of biochar production is, at least in our method, is something called acetic acid, which is often called wood vinegar. Essentially, it's like smoke dissolved in water, amongst other things. And when you spray it on crops, it smells like burning. So insects stay away from it. So it's essentially an organic pesticide slash repellent. So we're looking at developing a product in line with that, which is really exciting. Because actually with farmers, as many people here probably know, with farmers going organic, actually the most challenging thing is pests, not organic inputs. Organic inputs are quite easy to find. Organic pesticides are very expensive, very hard to come by. So that's very exciting as well.
Develop a new product line and try
New
and
product, new product line, making use of the sort of the byproduct. And then the most exciting thing for me is expansion. So we're working on a project in Mombasa, which would be about 2.5 times the size of this site at full capacity. We're then working on these projects with invasive species in Garissa and Shompole. So yeah, like that for me is very exciting, because once we build out this first site, it's all about picking up that blueprint and replicating it elsewhere. So maybe those are the 4 main things that we're kind of working on at the moment. And also just spreading the good word about a silly fertilizer as well.
And how are you guys dealing with HR while you're growing so fast?
It's a good question.
Building your team.
Yeah, so I mean, I have been doing a lot of that. I've been doing a lot of that. We actually recently, our finance manager, Faith, we've actually moved her into kind of like a more senior finance role, so less of the kind of admin. And then she's also taken on some HR responsibilities as well. She was actually kind of naturally doing quite a lot of it. And so we brought her in to kind of formalize a few processes and stuff. But for me, I spend a lot of time doing it. Like, I personally think that my main job is to help people do their best work and get the most out of work and grow and learn and kind of wherever possible. And you know, you've got to be realistic, but enjoy coming to work every day, or at least as often as is humanly possible. So I spend a lot of time doing it. But yeah, now we have Faith on board.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually something that you asked in your email around leadership, and around what our hiring strategy kind of is. Basically for me, what I want to do is, I mean, our whole team, apart from myself and Phil, are Kenyan. We are looking to help people grow within the business. So Faith's a really good example. Started just doing finance, quite kind of, you know, basic finance stuff. She was really great. And so we've moved her up into a new role, taken on new responsibility. Hopefully one day we can move her up again, you know. So for me, it's really about like providing a platform from which people can
Grow with the company, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hiring's a pain. I'd much rather have people go into roles internally rather than having to go out and hire people the whole time. So yeah, like I very much believe in empowering people to grow and to move into new roles. So
And I just kind of asked that question because then everybody else here can think about how that might apply to their HR strategies as well.
Yeah.
Because you know, this is not just biochar, but anything that's sustainable agriculture is such a growing sector, because so many of the entrepreneurs we have on this call today are actually helping farmers bring 50% more income in, or doubling their income, by bringing sustainable practices, or by introducing different crops to the land that they already have, so I know that this is a growing sector for basically everyone who's
Yeah,
here.
for sure. It's a great sector to be in. Like, it's growing really, really fast. There's a lot of interest. With HR, I would just say start early. And also as a business owner, or founder, or whatever you want to call it, your biggest strength is the people that work in the team, and your biggest differentiator is going to be being a place that people want to come and work. We've all had jobs in places that we felt uninspired or undervalued or all of the above, and you can really stand out when going out to the job market, even as a small company, by looking after people and making it a good place to work. So yeah, I would definitely say start early and invest a lot of your time in that. It will pay dividends for sure.
And let me see, I think we're kind of closing up here, but we do have a lot of folks in Kenya.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a question for other ones, but we do have a program specifically in Kenya, and perhaps one day, not sure, it is possible to schedule a visit to one of your plants. We don't have to know, but if it is, then it's something that we can definitely look into, and it'll be an easy lift for us on our side to help do that.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Would probably require a little bit of planning, but yeah, like we could definitely organize it at some stage. Maybe we can chat about that offline and come up with
offline. So thanks for the idea, Leon, Florida, and we'll be chatting about that offline and seeing when and how we could make that happen.
Yeah, great.
For our colleagues who are close by. I think that is taking us to the end of our session today. I really appreciate, and I think everybody here appreciates as well, just to give a preview of what's coming up next week on Tuesday. For the people who are in our Top 100 program, you'll be joining us with Luni and Rakia, giving a double header, talking about their experiences with investing. And then on Thursday, actually, I don't quite have the agenda pulled up, so I should have had it pulled up before I started talking. Sorry about that. But I'm sure that we will have something awesome for you. I'm getting it right now to see what is coming up. I just want to say it. But while I pull that up, also want to see if you have any final words for the group here, Rory, and then we'll invite everybody to share their thanks with you.
Yeah, no final words really. I guess, yeah, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, like if you have questions about biochar or anything at all, like yeah, feel free to drop me a line. LinkedIn's probably the easiest place. And yeah, I'm more than happy to try and help. But yeah, good luck in all your respective ventures. And yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you. And next week, we're going to be talking about non-timber forest products, various kinds of non-forest timber forest products. So that should be great. And we do have over 20 people who joined our WhatsApp group so far. So I think that if you didn't, you can definitely check it out on the chat box. It's still right there. And I'm trying to see about, so we could get the thanks going here. Everybody is able to unmute, and if you want to share your words of thanks, you could just go for it right now.
Yeah, thanks, Rory. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys next week.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Merci pour la session qui était très intéressante.
Thank you guys so much.
Pouvoir
Bye.
investir dans les